Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
The cold stone halls of the fortress monastery echo with the sounds of ancient machinery and whispered prayers. In darkened chambers, lit only by the glow of monitoring equipment, young aspirants lie strapped to surgical tables, their bodies being rewritten at the most fundamental level. This is not a gentle transformation. This is not a gift freely given. To become a Primaris space marine is to walk a path that kills more who attempt it than it saves. A journey that strips away almost everything that makes you human and replaces it with something designed for one purpose only, to be the perfect weapon in humanity's desperate war for survival. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Adeptus Astartes stand as humanity's greatest defenders. These transhuman warriors are legends given flesh, beings who tower over mortal men and fight with a ferocity that makes even the most hardened soldiers pale in comparison. But among these already superhuman warriors, there exists an even more enhanced breed. The Primaris Space Marines represent the pinnacle of what the Emperor's vision for humanity's defenders could achieve, combining ancient genetic engineering with innovations that took 10,000 years to perfect. Understanding what it takes to become a Primaris Marine means understanding sacrifice on a scale that most mortals cannot comprehend. It means accepting that the person you were will cease to exist, replaced by something simultaneously more and less than human. The transformation is not simply a matter of receiving enhanced organs and superior equipment. It is a fundamental remaking of body, mind, and spirit that takes years to complete and leaves scars that can never heal. Those who survive the process emerge as beings capable of feats that would seem impossible to those who have not witnessed them firsthand, but they pay a price for this power that extends far beyond the physical agony of the transformation itself. The path to becoming a Primaris Marine begins long before any aspirant sets foot in a chapter's fortress monastery. It begins in the careful selection of candidates from worlds across the Imperium, in the brutal trials that separate the worthy from the weak, and in the first terrifying moments when a young warrior realizes that they have been chosen for a fate that will either elevate them beyond humanity or destroy them utterly. From that moment forward, there is no turning back. The transformation has begun, and it will not stop until either a new Primaris Marine stands ready to serve the Emperor, or another name is added to the countless thousands who have died in the attempt. This is the story of that transformation. This is what it really takes to become a Primaris Marine in Warhammer 40k. The origins, Call's great work, and the Primaris project. To understand the creation of Primaris Marines, we must first travel back 10,000 years to the aftermath of the Horus heresy, to a time when the Imperium stood on the brink of collapse and desperate measures were being taken to ensure humanity's survival. In the wake of the most devastating civil war the galaxy had ever seen, Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and one of the Emperor's most brilliant sons, faced an impossible task. The Space Marine legions had been shattered by betrayal, with half turning to the corruption of chaos, and even the loyal legions bearing scars that would never fully heal. Guilliman understood that the Imperium needed more than just the reformation of the Space Marines into smaller chapters. It needed warriors who could face the horrors of the 41st Millennium with capabilities beyond even what the Emperor's original design had provided. To this end, Guilliman turned to one of the most brilliant and controversial figures in the Adeptus Mechanicus, Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Call. This ancient tech priest, whose own history was as complicated as it was extensive, was given a task that would consume the next 10 millennia of his existence. Guilliman charged Call with creating a new generation of Space Marines, warriors who would be bigger, stronger, and more resilient than their predecessors. But this was not to be a simple enhancement of the existing process. Call was to delve deep into the secrets of the gene seed itself, to understand the work the Emperor had done in creating the original Space Marines, and to improve upon it in ways that had been thought impossible. To aid in this monumental task, Guilliman provided Call with one of the most precious artifacts in the Imperium's possession, the Primaris Portum. This ancient device contained genetic information about all 20 of the original Primarchs, including those whose gene seed had proven unstable, or who had fallen to chaos. With this knowledge, Call could study the Emperor's work at its most fundamental level, understanding not just how the Space Marines had been created, but why they had been designed the way they were. It was an opportunity that no other tech priest had ever been given, and Call approached it with the obsessive dedication that would define the next 10,000 years of his existence. The work was painstaking and fraught with danger. Call had to navigate not only the technical challenges of genetic engineering on a scale that pushed even the Adeptus Mechanicus's considerable capabilities to their limits, but also the theological and political implications of attempting to improve upon the Emperor's original design. Many within the Mechanicus considered the Emperor's work to be perfection incarnate, and any attempt to modify it as bordering on blasphemy. Call had to be careful in how he framed his research, always positioning it as a restoration and perfection of the Emperor's vision rather than a fundamental alteration of it. Over the millennia that followed, Call made discovery after discovery. He identified weaknesses in the original gene seed design, places where the passage of time and repeated replication had introduced flaws that affected the stability and effectiveness of the implantation process. He experimented with new organs that could enhance the Space Marines' already formidable capabilities, pushing the boundaries of what was biologically possible while still maintaining genetic compatibility with the human baseline. And perhaps, most importantly, he developed methods to stabilize gene seed strains that had proven problematic, offering hope that even chapters descended from Primarchs with known mutations might receive reinforcements with fewer defects. The process was not without its setbacks. Early attempts at creating these enhanced warriors often ended in failure, with test subjects dying in agony as their bodies rejected the new implants or were overwhelmed by the changes being made to their physiology. Call refined his techniques through countless iterations, each failure teaching him something new about the limits of human biology and how those limits might be pushed without breaking entirely. He worked in secret facilities hidden beneath the surface of Mars, away from prying eyes that might question his methods or the theological implications of his work. During these long millennia, Call also began the process of actually creating the first generation of Primaris Marines. Using gene seed harvested from the most stable sources available and combining it with the new organs he had developed, Call began producing warriors who matched and exceeded the physical capabilities of the greatest Space Marines of the Great Crusade. These first Primaris Marines were placed in stasis, kept in suspended animation, while Call perfected his techniques and waited for the moment when they would be needed most. That moment came at the dawn of the 42nd Millennium, when the galaxy was torn apart by the opening of the Great Rift. Robert Guilliman, awakened from his 10,000-year slumber and horrified by what the Imperium had become in his absence, found himself facing an existential crisis that threatened to destroy everything the Emperor had built. It was then that Call revealed the fruits of his 10 millennia-long labor. Tens of thousands of Primaris Space Marines ready to reinforce the depleted chapters and turn the tide against the Imperium's enemies. The introduction of the Primaris Marines was not without controversy. Many Space Marines viewed these new warriors with suspicion, seeing them as potential replacements rather than reinforcements. Questions were raised about their loyalty, their combat effectiveness, and whether they truly represented an improvement over the tried and tested methods that had served the Imperium for 10,000 years. But as the Primaris Marines proved themselves in battle after battle, these doubts began to fade. They were not perfect, and they carried their own challenges and complications, but they were undeniably effective warriors whose capabilities exceeded those of traditional Space Marines in measurable ways. The creation of the Primaris Marines also led to the Ultima founding, one of the largest expansions of the Space Marine chapters, in Imperial history. Hundreds of new chapters were created, composed entirely of Primaris Marines and equipped with weapons and armor that incorporated the latest technological innovations Call had developed. These new chapters were dispatched across the galaxy as part of the Indomitus Crusade, bringing reinforcements to worlds that had been cut off by the Great Rift and reclaiming territories that had fallen to the enemies of mankind. But perhaps the most significant development was the creation of the Rubicon Primaris, a procedure that would allow existing Space Marines to undergo transformation into Primaris Marines. This was an incredibly dangerous process, with early attempts showing a failure rate of over 60%. But as Call refined the technique and more chapter apothecaries learned the necessary procedures, the Rubicon Primaris became a path by which veteran Space Marines could enhance their capabilities and continue to serve their chapters in new ways. The first successful crossing of the Rubicon Primaris was performed on Marneus Calgar, chapter master of the Ultramarines, whose survival and successful transformation opened the door for countless others to follow. Today, Primaris Marines serve in chapters across the Imperium, their enhanced capabilities making them invaluable assets in humanity's never-ending war for survival. But their creation remains one of the most complex and demanding processes in the entire Imperium, requiring resources, expertise, and a willingness to transform human beings into weapons that can stand against the darkness. Understanding how a Primaris Marine is made means understanding both the incredible science behind their creation and the terrible price that must be paid by those who undergo the transformation. Recruitment, the first steps on a path of transformation. The journey to becoming a Primaris Marine begins not in the sterile laboratories of a fortress monastery, but in the hardscrabble existence of the Imperium's countless worlds. Every Space Marine chapter maintains its own recruitment practices, traditions that have been refined over thousands of years and adapted to the specific circumstances of the worlds from which they draw their aspirants. For chapters creating Primaris Marines from scratch, rather than converting existing Space Marines through the Rubicon Primaris, the recruitment process represents the first and perhaps most crucial step in a transformation that will take years to complete. The ideal age for recruitment varies slightly depending on the chapter and the specific circumstances, but generally, aspirants are selected between the ages of 10 and 14. This narrow window exists because the gene seed implants work best when introduced to a body that has not yet fully matured. Once puberty has progressed too far, the chances of successful implantation decrease dramatically, and the risk of rejection or mutation increases exponentially. This means that Space Marine chapters are constantly searching for suitable candidates among the youth of their recruiting worlds, identifying those who possess the physical and mental characteristics that suggest they might survive the trials ahead. The worlds from which aspirants are drawn vary enormously in their nature and culture. Feral worlds, where humanity has regressed to a tribal existence and survival depends on strength, cunning, and endurance, are prized recruiting grounds. The constant struggle against hostile environments and dangerous predators produces young warriors who are already hardened by combat and accustomed to violence. Death worlds, where the very planet itself seems determined to kill its inhabitants, provide aspirants who understand survival at its most fundamental level and who have developed the kind of resilience that cannot be taught in any training program. Hive worlds, with their teeming billions packed into towering cities that scrape the sky, offer a different kind of recruit. The gang fighters who struggle for dominance in the depths of these urban nightmares possess a savage cunning and a willingness to kill that makes them ideal candidates for transformation into Space Marines. They have learned to fight with whatever weapons come to hand, to survive in environments where a single mistake means death, and to trust in their own abilities above all else. Feudal worlds, where society is organized along medieval lines and warrior cultures dominate, provide aspirants who already understand concepts like honor, duty, and loyalty to one's lord. The actual recruitment process varies dramatically from chapter to chapter, reflecting both their individual traditions and the specific characteristics of their recruiting worlds. Some chapters conduct formal trials, announcing their presence and inviting young warriors to compete for the honor of being selected. The Blood Angels, for example, hold their recruitment trials on the twin moons of Baal, where hundreds or even thousands of aspirants compete in brutal contests that test strength, speed, endurance, and will. Only a handful will be chosen from these contests, with the rest either dying in the attempt or returning to their tribes bearing the honor of having been deemed worthy to try. Other chapters take a more subtle approach, observing potential recruits from a distance before making their selection. The Space Wolves, heirs to the genetic legacy of Leman Russ, watch the tribes of Fenris for young warriors who display the characteristics they value: fearlessness in battle, loyalty to their pack brothers, and a ferocity that cannot be taught or manufactured. When a worthy candidate is identified, wolf priests descend from the sky in their aircraft, appearing like the gods of ancient myth to claim their chosen ones. Still, other chapters are more pragmatic, sometimes taking aspirants, whether they volunteer or not. The needs of the Imperium are great, and a young warrior who possesses the genetic compatibility and mental resilience necessary to become a space marine is too valuable to waste on a lesser fate. These forced recruitments are rarely spoken of openly, but they occur more frequently than most citizens of the Imperium would be comfortable knowing. A child who displays the right characteristics might simply disappear one night, taken by agents of the chapter to begin a transformation they never asked for, but which will define the rest of their existence. Before any aspirant can begin the actual process of transformation, they must undergo extensive testing. Tissue compatibility tests are essential because the gene seed implants require a very specific genetic profile to have any chance of successful integration. The human genome is incredibly diverse, and only a small fraction of the population possesses the genetic markers that allow them to accept the implants without immediate rejection. These tests are conducted with equipment that represents some of the most advanced biotechnology available to the Imperium, analyzing the aspirant's DNA at the molecular level to identify compatibility markers and potential complications. Psychological screening is equally important. The process of becoming a space marine is not merely a physical transformation. It requires a mental resilience that most humans simply do not possess. Aspirants must be tested for their ability to withstand pain, to maintain mental focus under extreme stress, and to respond to hypnotic suggestion. This last requirement is crucial because several of the gene seed organs will only develop properly if the recipient can be conditioned through hypnotherapy to consciously control biological processes that normally operate at the unconscious level. The screening also looks for psychological characteristics that might make an aspirant unsuitable for transformation, even if they are physically compatible. Those who display certain types of mental instability, who cannot be conditioned to follow orders without question, or who show signs of the kind of independence that might lead to future disobedience, are typically rejected. The Imperium needs warriors who will fight with discipline and cohesion, not lone wolves who might break ranks at crucial moments. There are exceptions to this, of course, with some chapters deliberately seeking aspirants who display characteristics that others might consider flaws, but even these chapters have limits on what they will accept. If an aspirant passes these initial tests, they officially become an aspirant in the eyes of the chapter, though they are still far from being considered a neophyte. What follows is a period of preliminary training designed to prepare them physically and mentally for the trials ahead. This training varies by chapter, but typically includes intense physical conditioning, basic weapons training, and initial indoctrination into the chapter's culture and beliefs. The aspirants learn the history of their chapter, the deeds of its heroes, and the expectations that will be placed upon them should they survive to become full battle brothers. Many chapters also subject their aspirants to preliminary trials that serve as final tests before the actual implantation process begins. These trials can take many forms, from survival challenges in hostile environments to ritualized combat against other aspirants, or even against controlled threats. The Blood Angels require their aspirants to climb the sheer cliffs of Angel's Fall, a journey that kills many before they even reach the fortress monastery. The Space Wolves require aspirants to survive the test of Morkai, where they are exposed to the chapter's unique gene seed component, the Canis Helix, which transforms some into space marines, but turns others into savage, beast-like creatures called Wolfen. These preliminary trials serve multiple purposes beyond simply testing the aspirant's capabilities. They begin the process of forging bonds between those who will become battle brothers, creating connections that will strengthen as they progress through the transformation together. They also serve to weed out those who might pass the genetic compatibility tests, but who lack the determination or mental resilience necessary to complete the full process. It is considered better for an aspirant to fail and die during these early trials than to fail later, after resources have been invested in their transformation and gene seed implants have been wasted on someone who could not survive to completion. Throughout this recruitment phase, the aspirants are constantly watched and evaluated by the chapter's chaplains and apothecaries. These experienced space marines can often identify potential problems before they become critical, recognizing signs of genetic incompatibility or psychological unsuitability that the initial testing might have missed. They also begin the process of psychological conditioning that will intensify once implantation begins, exposing the aspirants to the chapter's values and beliefs in ways designed to shape their thinking and prepare them for the indoctrination to come. The recruitment phase typically lasts several months, though this can vary depending on the chapter's needs and circumstances. During this time, the number of aspirants inevitably decreases. Some die during the trials, their bodies broken by challenges designed to push them beyond normal human limits. Others are rejected when hidden problems are discovered during the constant monitoring and evaluation. A few might even voluntarily withdraw, though this is rare. Most aspirants would rather die than admit defeat, especially when they have been selected from among hundreds or even thousands of candidates. By the time an aspirant is deemed ready to begin the actual implantation process and formally becomes a neophyte, they have already been transformed in subtle but important ways. They have been separated from their previous lives, cut off from families and communities they will never see again. They have been exposed to violence and death on a scale that would traumatize most adults, let alone children barely into their teens. They have begun to internalize the values and beliefs of the chapter, accepting that their individual existence matters less than their service to the Emperor and the Imperium. This is the foundation upon which the transformation into a Primaris Marine will be built. The aspirant has demonstrated that they possess the genetic compatibility, physical resilience, and mental strength necessary to have a chance at survival. They have proven their dedication through trials that would break most humans, and they have been judged worthy by those who have themselves undergone the transformation. Now begins the real work, the surgical and biological modifications that will either create a new Primaris Marine or add another casualty to the countless thousands who have died in the attempt. Neophyte training, forging mind and body. Once an aspirant has successfully completed the initial trials and been deemed worthy to begin the transformation, they officially become a neophyte. This title marks a fundamental transition, the moment when theoretical possibility becomes actual process, when the young warrior begins the journey that will either end in their death or their rebirth as something beyond human. The neophyte phase is perhaps the longest and most demanding part of becoming a Primaris Marine, stretching across years of constant training, surgical procedures, chemical treatments, and psychological conditioning. The neophyte's training must run parallel to the implantation process itself, because the gene seed organs being placed within their bodies require constant stimulation and conditioning to develop properly. An organ that is simply implanted and left alone will often fail to integrate with the neophyte's existing biology, remaining dormant or even becoming corrupted by rejection mechanisms built into the human immune system. To prevent this, the neophyte must constantly push their changing body to its limits, forcing the new organs to activate and integrate through sheer necessity. Physical training for neophytes is brutal by any standard. They are required to undergo constant exercise regimens that would be impossible for unenhanced humans, workouts designed to stimulate muscle growth and bone development as the implanted organs begin their work. A neophyte might be required to run for hours without rest, testing the limits of their enhanced cardiovascular system as their secondary heart learns to work in concert with their original one. They might be required to lift weights that would crush normal humans, forcing their enhanced muscles to develop strength that will eventually allow them to wear power armor and wield weapons that weigh more than an adult human. Combat training begins early and intensifies as the neophyte's body grows stronger and more capable. They learn to fight with bolters, chain weapons, combat knives, and their own enhanced strength. The training is not gentle. Neophytes frequently injure each other during sparring sessions, and these injuries are often allowed to persist longer than strictly necessary to test the healing capabilities granted by their enhanced biology. A broken bone that would sideline a normal soldier for months might be expected to heal in weeks for a neophyte, as their Laraman cells work to clot blood almost instantly, and their enhanced metabolism accelerates the repair of damaged tissue. Weapons training is comprehensive and unforgiving. Neophytes must master not just the standard armaments of the Adeptus Astartes, but also the specialized equipment that Primaris Marines utilize. They learn to handle the newer mark of bolters that Primaris Marines favor, weapons that fire more powerful rounds with greater accuracy than their predecessors. They train with plasma incinerators and other energy weapons, learning to respect the power they wield while maintaining the discipline necessary to use them effectively in the chaos of combat. They practice with combat knives until they can disassemble and reassemble the weapons blindfolded, until every action becomes automatic and instinctive. Tactical training is equally important. The neophytes are taught military strategy and tactics through constant drilling and simulated combat scenarios. They learn to read battlefields, to identify threats and opportunities, to coordinate with their fellow warriors in ways that maximize their collective effectiveness. They study the tactics employed by the Imperium's enemies, learning to recognize the distinctive combat patterns of Xenos species and Chaos forces, understanding how these foes think and fight so they can exploit their weaknesses and anticipate their movements. Throughout their physical training, neophytes are also subjected to the chemical treatments necessary to support their transformation. These treatments are administered constantly, with monitoring equipment tracking the neophyte's biological markers and adjusting the chemical cocktails to maintain optimal conditions for organ development. The treatments include hormone regulators to manage the massive changes occurring in the neophytes' bodies, immunosuppressants to prevent rejection of the implanted organs, and specialized compounds designed to enhance specific aspects of the transformation process. The chemical treatments are far from pleasant. Many of them cause significant discomfort or even pain, and neophytes must learn to endure these sensations as simply another aspect of their transformation. Nausea, headaches, joint pain, muscle cramps, and a host of other symptoms accompany the treatments, and neophytes are expected to continue their training and duties regardless of how they feel. This serves multiple purposes. It tests their pain tolerance and mental resilience. It conditions them to function effectively while experiencing physical discomfort, and it begins the process of divorcing them from the normal human response to suffering. Psychological conditioning intensifies during the neophyte phase, building upon the foundation laid during recruitment. The neophytes are exposed to constant indoctrination regarding the Emperor, the Imperium, and their chapter's specific beliefs and traditions. They learn the litanies and prayers that Space Marines recite before battle, memorizing the words until they can speak them even while focused on other tasks. They study the history of the Imperium and their chapter, learning about the great heroes whose examples they are expected to emulate, and the terrible traitors whose betrayals they must guard against. This indoctrination is not simply a matter of teaching facts or reciting catechisms. The neophytes are being psychologically conditioned to think in specific ways, to value certain things above others, to respond to threats and challenges with the appropriate level of aggression and discipline. They are taught to view themselves as weapons in the emperor's arsenal, as instruments of his will rather than as individuals with their own desires and aspirations. They learn to subordinate personal concerns to the needs of the chapter and the Imperium, accepting that their lives belong not to themselves, but to a greater cause. The intensity of this conditioning cannot be overstated. Neophytes spend hours in hypnomat chambers, their minds exposed to visual and auditory stimuli designed to reshape their thought patterns and reinforce desired behaviors. They undergo sessions with chaplains who probe their thoughts and beliefs, identifying and correcting any deviations from approved patterns of thinking. They participate in group rituals and ceremonies designed to forge bonds with their fellow neophytes, while simultaneously reinforcing their identity as members of the chapter collective rather than as individuals. Some neophytes struggle with this psychological reconditioning more than others. Those who come from cultures with strong traditions of individualism or who possess particularly independent personalities may find it difficult to accept the loss of autonomy that comes with becoming a space marine. The chaplains are experienced in identifying such resistance, and they employ various techniques to break down these psychological barriers. In most cases, the neophyte eventually accepts the conditioning, their previous identity gradually eroding until they can no longer clearly remember who they were before the transformation began. As the neophyte progresses through their training and the implantation process continues, they begin to develop abilities that would seem superhuman to unenhanced humans. They find that they can go days without sleep, their catalepsin node allowing them to rest portions of their brain while remaining conscious and alert. They discover that they can eat things that would poison normal humans, their enhanced digestive system breaking down toxins and extracting nutrients from sources that would kill ordinary soldiers. They realize that they can see in near total darkness, their modified eyes gathering available light with impossible efficiency. These developing abilities require their own training and conditioning. The neophyte must learn to control their enhanced senses, to filter out irrelevant information and focus on what matters in combat situations. They must learn to manage their altered sleep patterns, understanding when they can rely on their enhanced endurance and when they need to actually rest. They must learn to trust their enhanced senses and abilities, while also maintaining the discipline necessary to use them effectively, rather than becoming overconfident or reckless. Throughout the neophyte phase, the young warriors are constantly evaluated and monitored. Chaplains and apothecaries watch for signs of organ rejection, for psychological instability, for any indication that the transformation is not proceeding as it should. Neophytes who develop problems are immediately subjected to additional treatments or corrective procedures, and if these interventions fail, they may be removed from the program entirely. Some chapters maintain a merciful approach to such failures, granting failed neophytes a quick death. Others are more pragmatic, converting failed neophytes into servitors or other types of servants who can still serve the chapter in diminished capacities. The bonds formed between neophytes during this phase are among the strongest connections they will ever experience. They train together, suffer together, and watch each other transform from normal humans into something far beyond human capabilities. Those who survive the process together develop a camaraderie that transcends normal friendship, becoming battle brothers in the truest sense of the term. These bonds will sustain them through decades or even centuries of warfare.
I've got to be honest with you. The the psychological conditioning aspect disturbs me more than the physical transformations. Bodies heal, organs can be replaced, but the complete erasure of who someone was, that's permanent. These kids lose their memories, their capacity to feel certain emotions, their ability to ever truly be human again. And the worst part, they're conditioned not to care about what they've lost. I think that's what makes Warhammer 40k so compelling, but also so dark. It shows us a future where the only way to save humanity is to sacrifice our humanity itself. It's a paradox that I find myself thinking about long after I finish researching these videos. But yeah, let's get back to the story.
Providing psychological stability and mutual support in situations where isolated individuals might falter or break. The neophyte phase typically lasts between 6 and 8 years for Primaris Marines, though this timeline can vary depending on circumstances and the specific needs of the chapter. During this time, the neophytes undergo a transformation so profound that they become unrecognizable from the children who began the process. They grow taller and more muscular, their enhanced biology driving physical development that far exceeds normal human growth patterns. Their bones become as hard as ceramite, their muscles capable of exerting force that would shatter unaugmented human limbs. Their minds become weapons as sharp as any blade, honed by constant training and conditioning into perfect instruments of war. By the time a neophyte completes this phase of training and is deemed ready to receive the final implants that will mark them as full battle brothers, they have already been transformed in ways that would seem impossible to those who have not witnessed the process. They have endured years of constant pain, training, and conditioning. They have watched some of their fellow neophytes fail and die, learning that even the best candidates face no guarantee of survival. They have been shaped by their experiences into weapons perfectly suited for the Imperium's endless wars, warriors who will fight without hesitation and die without regret in service to the Emperor and mankind. The organ implantation process, becoming more than human. At the heart of the transformation from human to space marine lies the implantation process itself. A series of surgical procedures that introduce 19 separate gene seed organs into the neophyte's body. For Primaris Marines, this process is even more complex, involving not just the standard 19 organs, but 3 additional organs that mark the distinction between traditional Space Marines and their enhanced successors. Understanding this implantation process means confronting the sheer biological audacity of what the Emperor and later Belisarius Cawl accomplished in creating the Adeptus Astartes. The implantation process follows a specific sequence that has been refined over 10,000 years of practice. Each organ must be implanted at the appropriate time in the neophyte's development, when their body has reached the stage where it can accept and integrate the new biological components. Implanting organs too early or too late can result in rejection, mutation, or death, and the apothecaries who oversee the process must have an intimate understanding of human biology and the specific characteristics of their chapter's gene seed. The process begins with the secondary heart, known as Phase 1 of the implantation sequence. This organ is typically implanted first, between the ages of 10 and 14, marking the official beginning of the neophyte's transformation. The secondary heart is a fully functional additional cardiovascular organ, smaller than the original heart, but capable of taking over blood circulation if the primary heart is damaged or destroyed. More importantly, the secondary heart can boost blood flow throughout the body during times of extreme stress, allowing the enhanced physiology that will develop later to function at peak efficiency. The surgical procedure to implant the secondary heart is complex and dangerous. The neophyte's chest must be opened, the sternum cut and spread to provide access to the thoracic cavity. The secondary heart is carefully positioned and connected to the circulatory system through vessels that must be grafted with microscopic precision. The surgery can take hours, during which the neophyte is kept alive through a combination of chemical stabilization and the skills of the apothecaries performing the procedure. The recovery period following implantation is equally demanding, with the neophyte required to undergo constant monitoring to ensure that the new organ begins functioning properly and integrating with their existing cardiovascular system. Following successful implantation of the secondary heart, the neophyte typically receives 3 more organs in quick succession. The os modular, or phase 2, is implanted into the base of the brain, where it releases hormones that dramatically alter the neophyte's skeletal structure. These hormones trigger the absorption of ceramic-based chemicals that are added to the neophyte's diet, causing the bones to become extraordinarily dense and strong, while also growing rapidly in length. This is what gives Space Marines their characteristic size, with fully developed Primaris Marines standing approximately 8 to 8.5 feet tall, compared to the 7 to 7.5 feet typical of traditional Space Marines. The Biscopia Phase 3 is implanted as a small circular organ in the chest cavity. It works in concert with the os modular to produce the massive muscle growth characteristic of Space Marines. The Biscopia releases hormones that vastly increase muscle development throughout the body, creating musculature that is not only much larger than normal human muscle, but also significantly more efficient and powerful. A Space Marine's muscles can exert force far beyond what their size alone would suggest, and they recover from exertion with a speed that allows for sustained combat effectiveness that would be impossible for unenhanced warriors. The hemastamen, which some sources list as a component of the Biscopia implantation phase, further enhances blood production and management, working with the secondary heart to ensure that the rapidly growing neophyte's body receives adequate oxygen and nutrients to support its transformation. The precise sequencing and interaction of these early implants demonstrates the sophisticated understanding of human biology that went into designing the Space Marine creation process. After these initial organs have been successfully integrated, the neophyte enters a period of intensive physical growth and training while their body adapts to the changes. The visible transformation during this phase is dramatic. Neophytes grow taller at rates that would be alarming in normal humans, their bones lengthening and thickening as the os modular does its work. Their muscle mass increases exponentially, requiring massive increases in caloric intake to support. Many neophytes experience significant pain during this growth phase, as bones stretch and muscles develop faster than the surrounding tissues can comfortably accommodate. The subsequent phases of implantation introduce organs that grant specific enhanced capabilities. The Larraman's organ, implanted in the chest, produces special cells that are released into the bloodstream. When the neophyte is wounded, these Larraman cells migrate to the injury site and work to seal the wound almost instantly, forming a temporary barrier that prevents excessive blood loss and protects against infection. This gives Space Marines their legendary resilience to injury, allowing them to continue fighting even after sustaining wounds that would incapacitate or kill normal humans. The catalepsian node, implanted in the brain, modifies sleep patterns in ways that grant Space Marines their ability to function with minimal rest. This organ allows portions of the brain to enter a sleep state, while other portions remain conscious and alert, enabling a Space Marine to effectively rest while continuing to perform basic functions. This capability is crucial in extended combat operations, where true sleep is impossible or dangerous, allowing Space Marines to maintain effectiveness through campaigns that would exhaust normal soldiers within days. The preomnor, installed as a pre-digestive stomach, allows Space Marines to eat and extract nutrients from substances that would be toxic to normal humans. This organ neutralizes most poisons and toxins, allowing a Space Marine to consume local food sources on alien worlds without concern for biological incompatibility. It also serves as a backup digestive system that can function if the primary stomach is damaged, further enhancing the Space Marine's survivability in harsh conditions. The omophagia, implanted in the spinal cord, grants one of the most distinctive and disturbing abilities of Space Marines. This organ allows them to gain information and even memories from organic material they consume, particularly brain tissue. By eating a portion of an enemy's brain, a Space Marine can access that individual's memories, gaining intelligence about enemy positions, plans, or other crucial information. This capability, while enormously useful from a tactical perspective, is one of the more unsettling aspects of what Space Marines are capable of doing. The multi-lung, as its name suggests, provides an additional respiratory organ that allows Space Marines to breathe in environments that would be hostile to normal humans. This third lung can extract oxygen from atmospheres too thin to support human life, filter out toxins and pollutants, and even allow a Space Marine to breathe underwater for extended periods. The implantation of the multi-lung requires complex surgery that connects it to both the existing respiratory system and the secondary heart, creating an integrated system that gives Space Marines extraordinary environmental versatility. The oculobe modifies the eyes and optic nerves, vastly enhancing visual acuity and allowing Space Marines to see in low-light conditions that would leave normal humans effectively blind. The enhanced eyes can track fast-moving objects with precision, detect subtle movements at great distances, and adjust to sudden changes in light levels without the temporary blindness that affects unenhanced vision. Combined with the other enhanced senses Space Marines develop, the oculobe contributes to the superhuman awareness and reaction time that makes them such effective warriors. The lineman's ear replaces portions of the existing auditory system, providing enhanced hearing and granting immunity to dizziness and motion sickness. This organ also enhances the Space Marine's sense of balance, allowing them to fight effectively in zero-gravity, high-gravity environments, or any other conditions where normal humans would be disoriented. The ability to maintain spatial awareness and balance regardless of environmental conditions is crucial for Space Marines who must fight on battlefields ranging from airless asteroids to the decks of ships tumbling through space. The Sossen membrane, implanted in the brain, grants Space Marines the ability to enter a state of suspended animation. This organ can be activated either voluntarily or automatically in response to extreme trauma, shutting down most of the body's systems and placing the Space Marine in a death-like state where they can survive for years or even decades without food, water, or air. This capability has saved countless Space Marines who would otherwise have died from injuries sustained in battle, allowing them to be recovered and revived by their battle brothers once the immediate danger has passed. The melanochrome, which affects skin pigmentation, protects against radiation by modifying the skin's response to solar and other forms of radiation exposure. This organ allows Space Marines to fight on worlds with intense radiation or damaged ozone layers without the protective equipment normal humans would require. The melanochrome also causes changes in skin tone based on the local radiation environment, which can result in Space Marines from the same chapter developing different appearances based on where they have campaigned. The oolitic kidney is a sophisticated filtering organ that works with the existing kidneys to purify the blood with exceptional efficiency. This organ can neutralize most toxins and poisons, complementing the protections provided by the preomnor and allowing Space Marines to survive exposure to chemical weapons and environmental toxins that would be lethal to ordinary humans. The oolitic kidney also helps maintain the precise chemical balance necessary for the other implanted organs to function properly, making it a critical component of the Space Marines' integrated biological systems. The neuroglottis, implanted in the mouth and nasal passages, allows Space Marines to identify chemical compounds by taste and smell with extraordinary precision. This enhanced chemosensory capability can detect poisons in food or drink, identify specific chemical signatures in the environment, and even track targets by following their scent trail. The neuroglottis works in concert with the other enhanced senses to provide Space Marines with an almost superhuman awareness of their surroundings. The mucranoid modifies the sweat glands, allowing Space Marines to secrete a waxy substance that protects against environmental extremes. This secretion can provide temporary protection against vacuum, extreme heat or cold, and even some forms of chemical attack. While not a perfect environmental seal, the mucranoid's secretions can buy crucial time in situations where a Space Marine is exposed to conditions that would kill an unprotected human within seconds. The Betcher's gland, one of the more exotic implants, consists of 2 glands implanted in the mouth that allow space marines to synthesize and spit corrosive acid. This capability has obvious combat applications, allowing a space marine to dissolve through locks, barriers, or even enemy armor in situations where their weapons are unavailable. The acid produced by the Becher's gland is potent enough to eat through metal and can cause severe injuries if used as an improvised weapon. The progenoid glands are perhaps the most important organs from the perspective of ensuring the Adeptus Astartes' continuation as a fighting force. These glands, implanted in the neck and chest, mature over time and eventually produce the gene seed that can be harvested and used to create new space marines. The neck gland matures after 5 years, while the chest gland requires 10 years to reach maturity. When a space marine dies or is too badly injured to continue serving, the apothecaries harvest these glands, recovering the gene seed that represents the chapter's genetic legacy and allowing it to be passed on to the next generation of warriors. The final standard implant is the black carapace, or phase 19, which is typically the last organ implanted before a neophyte is considered a full battle brother. The black carapace is unlike the other organs in that it is not a discrete internal organ, but rather a layer of specialized tissue that is grown beneath the skin of the torso, arms, and legs. This tissue forms neural interfaces that allow a space marine's nervous system to directly connect with their power armor, essentially making the armor an extension of their body rather than simply protective equipment they wear. The implantation of the black carapace is one of the most extensive surgical procedures in the entire process. The neophyte's skin must be opened along specific lines, and the black carapace tissue is introduced in sheets that are carefully positioned to grow in the correct patterns. As the tissue develops, it forms neural connection points that will interface with the power armor's systems, allowing instantaneous communication between the Space Marine's thoughts and their armor's responses. This direct neural connection is what allows Space Marines to perform the seemingly impossible feats of agility and precision that make them so effective in combat, despite wearing armor that would leave an unconnected human feeling clumsy and restricted. Each implantation procedure carries significant risk. The neophyte's body might reject the organ, triggering immune responses that can be fatal if not immediately addressed. The surgery itself might be imperfectly performed, resulting in complications that only become apparent later. The chemical treatments necessary to support implantation might cause unexpected reactions in a particular neophyte's biology. The apothecaries who oversee the process are highly skilled surgeons with centuries of experience, but even they cannot eliminate all risk from a process as complex and radical as transforming a human child into a transhuman warrior. Throughout the implantation process, which typically takes place over 6 to 8 years for Primaris Marines, the neophyte is constantly monitored and tested. Each organ's function is carefully tracked, with chemical treatments adjusted to maintain optimal conditions for integration and development. Physical training is calibrated to stress the developing systems without overwhelming them, forcing the organs to activate and integrate, while avoiding the kind of damage that might cause rejection or failure. Psychological conditioning continues throughout, ensuring that the neophyte's mind develops alongside their body into the warrior mentality necessary for effective service as a Space Marine. The cumulative effect of these 19 organs is to transform a human being into something that transcends normal human limitations. A fully realized Space Marine possesses strength, speed, endurance, and resilience that make them the equals of lesser Xeno species in physical combat. They can fight for days without rest, endure wounds that would kill normal humans multiple times over, survive in environments that would be immediately lethal to unenhanced warriors, and process combat information with a speed and clarity that gives them seemingly superhuman reaction times. They are, in every meaningful sense, posthuman warriors designed to be the ultimate defenders of mankind. For Primaris Marines, this process includes 3 additional organs that distinguish them from their traditional Space Marine brothers, and represent the culmination of Belisarius Caul's 10 millennia of genetic research. These organs push the boundaries of what space marine physiology can accomplish even further, creating warriors who exceed even the already superhuman capabilities of traditional Astartes. The three Primaris organs, enhanced beyond enhanced. The distinction between traditional space marines and Primaris marines comes down to three additional gene seed organs that Archmagos Belisarius Caul developed over his 10,000-year mission to enhance the Emperor's original design. These organs, implanted between Phase 3 and Phase 4 of the normal sequence, represent the cutting edge of biological engineering and genetic manipulation within the Imperium. They are what make Primaris marines larger, stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more effective as warriors than their already superhuman predecessors. The first of these three organs is the sinew coils, sometimes referred to as the steel within. Unlike most of the other gene seed organs, which are biological in nature, the sinew coils represent a fusion of biological and mechanical engineering. They consist of durametallic coil cables, extremely strong metal fiber bundles that are integrated into the neophyte's musculoskeletal system. These coils reinforce the tendons and ligaments throughout the body, dramatically increasing their tensile strength and resistance to damage, while also providing an additional layer of internal armor that protects against injuries that would tear or snap the connective tissues of traditional space marines. The implantation of the sinew coils is one of the most extensive surgical procedures in the entire Primaris transformation process. The neophyte must be opened along multiple incision points to provide access to the major muscle groups and skeletal attachment points throughout their body. The sinew coils are then carefully threaded through the existing biological structures, integrated with the tendons and ligaments in ways that enhance their function without disrupting the natural biomechanics of movement. The coils must be precisely calibrated to the individual neophyte's anatomy, because even slight misalignments can result in movement restrictions or painful binding during physical activity. The integration period for the sinew coils is particularly challenging. As the metallic reinforcements become part of the neophyte's body, they trigger immune responses that must be carefully managed through chemical treatment. The body attempts to reject the foreign material, and only through constant intervention can the apothecaries convince the neophyte's biology to accept the coils as part of itself. During this period, the neophyte experiences significant discomfort and stiffness as their body adjusts to the presence of the metallic components within their soft tissues. Once fully integrated, the sinew coils provide several crucial benefits. The enhanced tensile strength of the reinforced tendons and ligaments means that Primaris marines can exert greater force without risking injury to themselves. Where a traditional space marine might need to be cautious about the limits of their own biology when lifting extremely heavy objects or delivering powerful blows, a Primaris marine's sinew coils provide protection that allows them to push their enhanced musculature to its absolute limits. This translates directly to combat effectiveness, allowing Primaris marines to hit harder, carry heavier weapons and equipment, and perform feats of strength that even other space marines find impressive. The internal protection provided by the sinew coils also enhances the Primaris marine's survivability. Injuries that would tear muscle from bone or rupture connective tissues in a traditional space marine are often stopped or significantly reduced by the durametallic reinforcement. This means that Primaris marines can sustain severe trauma and continue fighting when traditional space marines would be rendered combat ineffective by damaged musculoskeletal systems. The coils don't make Primaris marines invulnerable, but they add another layer of resilience to an already remarkably durable physiology. The second unique Primaris organ is the Magnificat, also known as the amplifier. This organ is particularly significant from a historical and theological perspective because it represents half of the immortis gland, a dual-valve superorgan that the Emperor created for the Primarchs. Specifically, the Magnificat is the dextrophic lobe, the right half of the original organ. Archmagos Call was unable to recreate the left half, known as the Centaurus, because the information necessary to construct it had been completely eradicated from all imperial records. Whether this erasure was the work of the emperor himself or some other party remains unknown, but the loss of this knowledge means that even Primaris Marines possess only a portion of what the Primarchs were given. Despite being only half of the original organ, the Magnificat has profound effects on the Primaris transformation. It is implanted deep within the brain, a thumbnail-sized lobe that becomes part of the core neural structure. From this position, the Magnificat secretes hormones that dramatically enhance the body's growth functions and intensify the effectiveness of the other gene seed organs, particularly the osmodular and biscopea. In essence, the Magnificat acts as a force multiplier for the entire Space Marine enhancement process, taking systems that were already superhuman and pushing them to even greater extremes. The implantation of the Magnificat is perhaps the most delicate surgical procedure in the entire Primaris creation process. The neophyte's skull must be opened, and the organ must be precisely positioned within the brain tissue where it can integrate with the existing neural structures. Any error in placement could result in neurological damage that would render the neophyte permanently disabled or kill them outright. The surgery requires the absolute pinnacle of apothecary skill, often with multiple surgeons working in concert to ensure perfect precision. Recovery from Magnificat implantation is equally challenging. The neophyte experiences significant neurological changes as the organ integrates with their brain and begins secreting its enhancement hormones. Many neophytes report vivid dreams or altered perceptions during this period, and psychological monitoring is intensified to watch for signs of personality changes or mental instability that might indicate problems with the integration process. The chaplains work closely with recovering neophytes, reinforcing their indoctrination and ensuring that their core identity as a servant of the Emperor remains intact despite the profound changes occurring within their brain chemistry. Once fully functional, the Magnificat's effects are dramatic. Primaris Marines grow larger than traditional Space Marines, with the average Primaris standing approximately 8 to 8.5 feet tall, compared to the 7 to 7.5 feet typical of firstborn Astartes. Their muscle mass is proportionally greater as well, giving them superior strength even beyond what the sinew coils provide through mechanical reinforcement. The Magnificat's hormone secretions also enhance the function of other organs throughout the body, making everything from the secondary cardiovascular system to the enhanced sensory organs work more efficiently and effectively. The long-term effects of the Magnificat extend beyond simple physical enhancement. Primaris Marines appear to age more slowly than traditional Space Marines, maintaining peak physical condition for longer periods. They show greater resistance to the genetic degradation that can affect gene seed over time, suggesting that Call's work in creating the Magnificat also incorporated solutions to some of the stability problems that have plagued certain chapters' gene seed for millennia. These improvements are particularly notable in chapters descended from Primarchs, whose gene seed carried known mutations or instabilities, where Primaris Marines often display fewer or less severe manifestations of these genetic quirks. The third and final unique Primaris organ is the Belisarian furnace, named after its creator with characteristic humility. Also known as the Revitalizer, this organ is a dormant backup system that connects to both of the Primaris Marines' hearts. Under normal circumstances, the Belisarian furnace remains inactive, quietly building up reserves of specialized chemicals that it synthesizes from materials in the bloodstream. When the Primaris Marine sustains severe trauma or experiences extreme stress that threatens their life, the Belisarian furnace activates automatically. The activation of the Belisarian furnace is dramatic and potentially life-saving. The organ expels massive quantities of self-synthesized chemicals directly into the bloodstream, a hyper-cocktail that simulates the effects of combat stimulants while simultaneously jump-starting the body's healing processes. These chemicals dramatically accelerate tissue repair, bone regrowth, and muscle regeneration, allowing a critically injured Primaris marine to recover from wounds that would incapacitate or kill even a traditional space marine. The effect is similar to what some humans experience during extreme adrenaline surges, but far more powerful and directed specifically at survival and continued combat effectiveness. The implantation of the Belisarian furnace is technically challenging because it must be connected to both hearts in ways that allow it to rapidly inject its chemical payload into the central circulatory system. The organ itself is relatively small, but the connections required are complex and must be engineered to withstand the tremendous pressures involved when the furnace activates. Improper installation can result in the organ failing to activate when needed, or worse, activating inappropriately and flooding the Primaris marine system with chemicals when they are not required. The Belisarian furnace's activation is not without drawbacks. The massive chemical surge it produces is enormously taxing on the body, and after activation, the furnace becomes dormant again for an extended period, while it metabolically rebuilds its chemical reserves. A Primaris marine cannot rely on the furnace to save them multiple times in rapid succession. It is a last-chance failsafe, rather than a continuously available emergency system. Additionally, the physical and psychological effects of the activation can be disorienting, and Primaris marines must learn to function effectively even while their body is flooded with the furnace's chemical cocktail. The Belisarian furnace plays a crucial role in the Rubicon Primaris procedure, which allows traditional space marines to be converted into Primaris marines. During this procedure, the patient effectively dies as the new organs are implanted and their body undergoes massive trauma. The activation of the newly installed Belisarian furnace is what brings them back to life, jump-starting their systems and triggering the cascade of healing and regeneration necessary for the transformation to succeed. Without the furnace's intervention, the Rubicon Primaris would be impossible, as the trauma of the procedure would be unsurvivable even for space marines. Together, these three organs represent the culmination of Belisarius Call's genetic research and the physical manifestation of what makes Primaris marines superior to their predecessors in measurable ways. The sinew coils provide enhanced strength and resilience. The Magnificat amplifies all the other enhancements and drives superior physical development. The Belisarian furnace provides a failsafe that can save a Primaris marine from injuries that would be fatal to traditional Astartes. Combined with the 19 standard gene seed organs and the extensive training and conditioning that accompanies their implantation, these three additional organs create warriors who represent the absolute peak of what genetically enhanced humanity can achieve, while still maintaining enough connection to human biology to be replicated and sustained. The implantation of these Primaris organs typically occurs between the ages of 12 and 13, during the window between Phase 3 and Phase 4 of the standard implantation sequence. This timing is crucial because it allows the organs to integrate during a period when the neophyte's body is still developing rapidly but has already begun accepting the earlier implants. The Primaris organs work synergistically with the other gene seed components, their effects multiplying and enhancing each other in ways that pure addition of capabilities would not achieve. For the neophytes undergoing this enhanced transformation, the addition of the Primaris organs represents both an honor and an ordeal. They are being granted capabilities that will make them superior warriors, but the price is additional surgeries, more intensive chemical treatments, longer recovery periods, and greater risk of complications or death. The neophytes are constantly reminded that they are receiving enhancements that their predecessors did not possess, that they are inheritors of knowledge and capabilities that took 10,000 years to develop. This awareness becomes part of their identity, shaping how they see themselves and their role in the Imperium's wars. Hypno-indoctrination and psycho-conditioning. The physical transformation of a human into a Primaris marine dramatic and comprehensive as it is, represents only half of the process. Equally important, though far less visible, is the psychological transformation that accompanies the surgical and biological changes. A body enhanced with gene seed organs but lacking the proper mental conditioning would not be a space marine. It would be a dangerous aberration, a superhuman being without the discipline, loyalty, or purpose necessary to channel their capabilities toward productive ends. The hypno-indoctrination and psycho-conditioning that neophytes undergo is what transforms enhanced humans into devoted warriors of the Emperor. Hypno-indoctrination is a psycho-encoding process that rapidly instills knowledge and instinctive responses within the neophyte's psyche through the use of modifiable mimetic packages. This technology has ancient roots, dating back to the Dark Age of technology and the pre-unification civilizations of Terra. During the Great Crusade, hypno-indoctrination found limited but important use within the Space Marine legions, providing a way to accelerate the training of recruits without requiring them to spend years or decades learning combat techniques and tactical knowledge through traditional methods. The process centers around a device called a hypnomat, a specialized chamber designed to subject the neophyte to carefully controlled hypnotic stimuli. The neophyte is placed inside the hypnomat in a state of induced hypnosis, their conscious mind suppressed while their subconscious remains accessible to external inputs. Visual and auditory stimuli are then presented in specific patterns and sequences designed to encode information directly into the neophyte's memory without the need for conscious learning or practice. The hypnomat's interior is a claustrophobic space lined with displays and speakers, creating an immersive environment where the neophyte's senses are completely dominated by the stimuli being presented. The displays show images that range from technical schematics of weapons and equipment to tactical scenarios that the neophyte might encounter in combat. The audio component includes everything from weapon fire patterns that train the neophyte to identify different weapons by sound alone, to litanies and catechisms that reinforce the chapter's beliefs and values. During a typical hypno-indoctrination session, which might last anywhere from several hours to entire days, the neophyte experiences the information being encoded as a form of waking dream. They see themselves performing actions, responding to situations, making decisions, all within the controlled environment of the hypnomat's mimetic programming. The experience feels real to their hypnotized mind, and when they emerge from the session, the knowledge and instincts encoded during it remain as if they had been learned through actual experience. The applications of hypno-indoctrination in creating Space Marines are extensive. Neophytes can be taught weapons handling, combat tactics, technical knowledge about equipment maintenance and repair, enemy recognition and threat assessment, and countless other forms of practical knowledge that would take years to acquire through conventional training methods. A neophyte who has undergone proper hypno-indoctrination can disassemble and reassemble a bolter blindfolded, not because they have practiced the action hundreds of times, but because the knowledge and muscle memory have been encoded directly into their mind through hypnotic programming. However, hypno-indoctrination is not without its limitations and dangers. The process is most effective when used to reinforce knowledge that the neophyte is also learning through conventional training, creating multiple neural pathways for the same information. Pure hypno-indoctrination without hands-on practice produces warriors who know what they should do in theory, but lack the intuitive understanding that comes from actual experience. During the Horus Heresy, when both loyalist and traitor legions accelerated their recruitment to replace catastrophic losses, heavy reliance on hypno-indoctrination without adequate conventional training produced Marines who demonstrated stunted tactical acumen and reduced combat effectiveness compared to their traditionally trained brothers. More seriously, excessive or improperly calibrated hypno-indoctrination can cause permanent psychological damage. Studies of heavily indoctrinated Marines from the Heresy era revealed severe neural degradation, persona dissociation, scarring of brain structures responsible for impulse control, and loss of pre-enhancement memories. The affected Marines often displayed decreased inhibition and increased aggression, making them more savage in combat, but less capable of the disciplined coordination that makes Space Marine tactics so effective. In the worst cases, repeated hypno-indoctrination essentially erased the original personality, leaving only the programmed responses and beliefs, without any of the individual character that makes a warrior more than just a weapon. Because of these dangers, modern chapter recruitment practices use hypno-indoctrination more carefully and sparingly than was common during the heresy. The process is integrated with conventional training rather than replacing it, providing accelerated learning without completely bypassing the need for practical experience. Neophytes undergo hypno-indoctrination sessions regularly throughout their transformation, but these sessions are carefully calibrated to avoid the neural damage that excessive encoding can cause. The apothecaries and chaplains who oversee the process monitor each neophyte for signs of psychological degradation, adjusting the intensity and frequency of hypno-indoctrination to maintain an optimal balance between rapid knowledge transfer and the preservation of mental stability. Beyond simple knowledge transfer, hypno-indoctrination serves another crucial purpose: teaching the neophyte to consciously control biological processes that normally operate at the unconscious level. Several of the gene seed organs will only function properly if the Space Marine can mentally access and regulate their activity. The catalepsian node, which allows for modified sleep patterns, requires the Space Marine to learn how to selectively shut down portions of their brain while keeping others active. The Susan membrane, which induces suspended animation, must be voluntarily activated in most circumstances, rather than triggering automatically. The hypnomat is used to train these abilities by placing the neophyte in a hypnotic state and guiding their awareness to their own internal processes. They learn to sense their heart rate, their blood pressure, their hormone levels, and dozens of other physiological markers that unenhanced humans cannot directly perceive. More importantly, they learn to influence these processes through conscious will, altering their metabolism and organ function in ways that seem impossible to those who have not undergone the training. This conscious control of biology is what allows Space Marines to perform many of their most impressive feats. From surviving in hostile environments to recovering from injuries with supernatural speed. Psychological conditioning extends far beyond the hypnomat sessions. Every aspect of a neophyte's existence is designed to shape their thinking and reinforce specific values and beliefs. They are immersed in the chapter's culture from the moment they begin the transformation process, exposed constantly to its history, traditions, and heroes. They memorize litanies and catechisms until they can recite them automatically while focused on other tasks. They participate in rituals and ceremonies designed to forge bonds with their fellow neophytes, while simultaneously reinforcing their identity as members of the chapter collective. The chaplains play a central role in this psychological conditioning, serving as the spiritual guides and custodians of the chapter's beliefs. They conduct regular sessions with neophytes, probing their thoughts and feelings to identify any deviations from approved patterns of thinking. They teach the neophytes about the Emperor and the Imperium, about duty and sacrifice, about the importance of loyalty to the chapter and to humanity. They identify neophytes who struggle with the conditioning and apply additional measures to break down resistance and ensure compliance. This conditioning is not gentle or subtle. The neophytes are being psychologically remade as thoroughly as they are being physically transformed, their previous identities gradually erased and replaced with new ones centered entirely on their role as Space Marines. They learn to value different things than they did before, to view their own lives as less important than the missions they will be assigned, to accept that they exist to serve rather than to live for their own purposes. The transformation is profound and irreversible, creating warriors whose psychology is fundamentally different from that of unenhanced humans. The intensity and effectiveness of this conditioning varies somewhat, depending on the neophyte's background and personality. Those who come from cultures that already revere Space Marines as the Emperor's angels often adapt more easily to the indoctrination, as it aligns with beliefs they already held. Those who come from more individualistic cultures, or who possess naturally independent personalities, may struggle more with the loss of autonomy that comes with becoming a Space Marine. The chaplains are experienced in identifying and addressing such resistance, employing techniques ranging from gentle persuasion to more forceful psychological intervention, depending on what they judge necessary. One particularly effective aspect of the conditioning is the use of group identity and peer pressure to reinforce desired behaviors and beliefs. Neophytes train together, suffer together, and are constantly reminded that they are part of something larger than themselves. They develop strong bonds with their fellow neophytes, and these bonds become tools for enforcing conformity to chapter values. A neophyte who might resist direct conditioning from chaplains often finds it much harder to resist when their peers express disapproval or concern about their attitudes and beliefs. The conditioning also includes elements designed to reduce the neophyte's capacity for certain emotions and responses that might interfere with their effectiveness as warriors. Fear, particularly fear of death, is systematically suppressed through both psychological conditioning and the physiological changes caused by the gene seed organs. The neophytes are exposed to situations designed to desensitize them to violence and death, learning to view combat as simply another form of work, rather than as something emotionally significant. They are taught to compartmentalize their responses to trauma, to push away feelings that might distract them from their duties. This emotional suppression is not complete, and Space Marines are not mindless automatons incapable of feeling. They retain the capacity for loyalty, camaraderie, pride in accomplishment, and even something resembling joy in the fulfillment of their duties. But the range and intensity of their emotional experiences is narrowed and focused, channeled toward responses that enhance their effectiveness as warriors rather than interfering with it. A Space Marine can watch a fellow battle brother die without experiencing the kind of paralyzing grief that would affect an unenhanced human, processing the loss as a tactical setback to be compensated for, rather than as a personal tragedy. Throughout the hypno-indoctrination and psycho-conditioning process, the chaplains watch carefully for signs that a neophyte's mind is being damaged by the transformation. Some individuals simply cannot withstand the intensity of the conditioning without suffering psychological breaks that render them unsuitable for service as Space Marines. Others develop psychological aberrations that, while not necessarily disqualifying them from service, require careful management to prevent them from becoming liabilities. In rare cases, neophytes emerge from the conditioning process with enhanced psychological resilience that makes them candidates for leadership roles within the chapter. The end result of this comprehensive psychological conditioning is a warrior whose mind has been shaped as thoroughly as their body has been enhanced. They think like Space Marines, viewing the world through a lens of duty, loyalty, and service. They respond to threats and challenges with the kind of disciplined aggression that makes them effective in combat without rendering them uncontrollable. They maintain the mental focus necessary to coordinate complex tactics while engaged in the chaos of battle. They accept their role as weapons in the Emperor's arsenal without question or resentment, finding purpose and meaning in service that most unenhanced humans would find unbearable. For Primaris Marines, this psychological conditioning is even more intensive than for traditional Space Marines, reflecting both the greater investment represented by their enhanced physiology and the higher expectations placed upon them. They are being created to be the exemplars of what Space Marines should be, and their conditioning reinforces this identity constantly. They are taught that they represent the culmination of 10,000 years of refinement and improvement, that they carry responsibility not just for their own service, but for proving the worth of the entire Primaris project. This additional psychological burden can be both motivating and constraining. Primaris Marines often display a particular dedication to proving themselves worthy of the resources invested in their creation, driving themselves to excel in training and combat with an intensity that can impress even veteran traditional Space Marines. But they also sometimes struggle with the weight of expectations placed upon them, feeling pressure to be perfect that can create stress even in beings designed to be psychologically resilient. The Rubicon Primaris, a second chance at ascension. While most Primaris Marines are created from scratch through the standard recruitment and implantation process, there exists another path to joining their ranks, the Rubicon Primaris. This procedure allows traditional Space Marines, sometimes called firstborn Astartes, to undergo a second transformation that converts them into Primaris Marines through the implantation of the 3 additional organs that distinguish the enhanced warriors from their predecessors. The Rubicon Primaris represents one of the most dangerous medical procedures in the entire Imperium, a process so traumatic that early attempts showed failure rates exceeding 60%. The name Rubicon Primaris deliberately evokes the ancient Terran phrase, crossing the Rubicon, which referred to taking an irrevocable step from which there could be no return. For a Space Marine contemplating this procedure, the metaphor is entirely appropriate. Once begun, the Rubicon cannot be reversed. The warrior will either emerge as a Primaris Marine or die in the attempt. There is no middle ground, no possibility of returning to their previous state if complications arise. The decision to cross the Rubicon is thus one of the most significant choices a Space Marine can make, committing them to a path that will fundamentally alter their existence or end it. The technical challenges of the Rubicon Primaris are formidable. Unlike neophytes, whose bodies are still developing and adapting to the initial gene seed implants, a Space Marine undergoing the Rubicon has a fully mature enhanced physiology that has been stable for years or even centuries. Introducing new organs into this established system requires disrupting the delicate balance that has developed, forcing the body to accept major changes that it has no biological incentive to accommodate. The Space Marine's enhanced immune system, which normally protects them from infection and disease, becomes an enemy during the Rubicon, attacking the new implants as foreign invaders that must be destroyed. The procedure itself is extensive and agonizing, even by the standards of surgical interventions performed on Space Marines. The patient is cut open from crown to heel, their entire body laid bare to provide access to the locations where the 3 Primaris organs must be implanted. The rib cage is cracked apart to expose the heart and surrounding structures where the Belisarian furnace must be connected. The skull is opened to allow the Magnificat to be positioned deep within the brain. The sinew coils must be threaded throughout the musculoskeletal system, requiring access to muscle groups and skeletal attachment points across the entire body. Multiple apothecaries work simultaneously during the Rubicon because the procedure must be completed within a relatively narrow time frame to have any chance of success. As the surgeons work, they must suppress the patient's healing physiology to prevent the enhanced metabolism from attempting to seal wounds before the work is complete. This suppression pushes the Space Marine closer and closer to actual death, and at the climax of the procedure, their life signs typically flatline completely. The patient is, for all intents and purposes, dead, their enhanced biology pushed past the point where it can sustain life. This is where the Belisarian furnace becomes crucial. As the final connections are made and the patient's body lies still and lifeless on the surgical table, the newly installed furnace is artificially triggered, flooding the system with its chemical cocktail of stimulants and healing factors. If the implantation has been successful and the organ functions properly, the massive chemical surge jumpstarts the Space Marines' hearts and triggers a cascade of healing and regeneration. The patient claws their way back from death, their body reacting to the furnace's activation with a surge of vitality that can seem almost miraculous to observers. The psychological experience of crossing the Rubicon is as traumatic as the physical procedure. Space Marines who survive the process often describe it as dying and being reborn, experiencing a void of non-existence before being violently pulled back into consciousness by the furnace's activation. Some report visions or experiences during the period when they were technically dead, though whether these are genuine encounters with something beyond the material world or simply artifacts of their dying brain attempting to process the trauma remains unknown. What is certain is that crossing the Rubicon marks a space marine in ways that go beyond the physical enhancements they receive. Recovery from the Rubicon Primaris is lengthy and demanding. The Space Marine must undergo intensive physical therapy as they learn to use their enhanced body, which now possesses capabilities and proportions significantly different from what they were accustomed to before the procedure. The Magnificat's effects on their growth hormones can cause a renewed growth spurt, adding inches to their height and substantially increasing their muscle mass. They must relearn how to move, how to judge distances, how to calibrate the force of their blows and the extent of their reach, all while still recovering from the massive trauma of the procedure itself. The first successful Rubicon Primaris was performed on Marneus Calgar, the chapter master of the Ultramarines and one of the most legendary warriors in the Imperium. Calgar's decision to undergo the procedure was driven by multiple factors: his desire to continue serving his chapter with maximum effectiveness, his recognition that the Primaris Marines represented a significant advancement in Space Marine capabilities, and his understanding that as a leader, he needed to demonstrate his willingness to embrace the changes that the return of Roboute Guilliman had brought to the Imperium. His successful crossing of the Rubicon opened the door for other Space Marines to follow, demonstrating that the procedure was possible even if it remained extremely dangerous. The procedure performed on Calgar has become known as the Calgarian Rites in honor of his courage in being the first to successfully undergo the transformation. The term reflects both respect for his willingness to risk death and acknowledgement of the ordeal he endured. Witnesses to Calgar's procedure described it as one of the most harrowing sights they had ever witnessed, even among Space Marines accustomed to the horrors of war. The sight of a legendary warrior lying opened from crown to heel, his life slipping away as the apothecaries worked, only to be violently pulled back to existence by the activation of the Belisarian furnace, left an impression that many found difficult to process. Calgar's survival and successful transformation dramatically changed the calculus around the Rubicon Primaris. Before his success, the procedure was largely theoretical, with projections suggesting failure rates that made it nearly suicidal for most Space Marines to attempt. After Calgar demonstrated that even a Space Marine of advanced age and bearing numerous old injuries could successfully cross the Rubicon, interest in the procedure increased dramatically. Chapters began identifying candidates who might benefit from the enhancement, weighing the risks against the potential gains in combat effectiveness. As more Space Marines successfully crossed the Rubicon and Archmagus Call, and the various chapter apothecaries refined their techniques, the failure rate gradually decreased. By the later years of the Plague Wars, the procedure had become much safer, though it remained far from routine. The development of better surgical techniques, improved understanding of how to manage the patient's enhanced physiology during the critical phases, and accumulated experience with the recovery process all contributed to making the Rubicon more survivable. It became increasingly unusual for high-ranking firstborn Space Marines to choose not to undergo the procedure if they were deemed suitable candidates. The decision about who should attempt the Rubicon is complex and varies by chapter. Some chapters prioritize their leadership, reasoning that veteran officers with centuries of experience are too valuable to risk losing even temporarily, making the Rubicon worthwhile if it means these leaders can continue serving for additional decades or centuries. Other chapters focus on battle brothers who have sustained injuries that would eventually force them into retirement, offering the Rubicon as a way to repair damage and extend their service. Still others see the Rubicon as a reward for exceptional service, a recognition that a warrior has proven themselves worthy of the enhancement. Age is a significant factor in Rubicon candidacy. Younger Space Marines generally have better success rates because their enhanced physiology is still relatively adaptable, making it easier for their bodies to accept the new organs. Older Space Marines face higher risks, though Calga's success demonstrated that age alone is not disqualifying. The condition of the candidate's existing gene seed organs is also important. Space Marines whose organs are degraded or damaged have lower success rates than those whose physiology remains in optimal condition. For Space Marines considering the Rubicon, the decision involves weighing multiple factors. On one hand, successful transformation offers significant advantages: increased strength and resilience, enhanced healing capabilities through the Belisarian furnace, and the psychological satisfaction of achieving a second ascension. On the other hand, the procedure carries substantial risk of death, requires months of recovery during which the Space Marine cannot serve their chapter in combat, and involves experiencing trauma that even centuries of battle may not have prepared them for. Some Space Marines embrace the Rubicon eagerly, seeing it as an opportunity to prove themselves anew and to gain capabilities that will make them more effective servants of the Emperor. Others approach it with trepidation, understanding the risks and the trauma involved, but accepting them as necessary if they wish to continue serving at peak effectiveness. A few refuse the Rubicon entirely, preferring to maintain their current form and capabilities rather than risk the transformation, though such refusals can sometimes be seen as lack of dedication or courage, depending on the chapter's culture. The psychological impact of crossing the Rubicon extends beyond the immediate trauma of the procedure itself. Space Marines who successfully transform often find that their perspective on their own existence has shifted. Having died and been reborn, they sometimes display a renewed sense of purpose and dedication to their service. Others struggle with questions about their identity, wondering whether they are truly the same being they were before, or something different wearing the same name and memories. These philosophical concerns are rarely spoken of openly, but chaplains who counsel those who have crossed the Rubicon report that such questions are common in the aftermath of successful transformations. The Rubicon has also created interesting dynamics within chapters that contain both Firstborn and Primaris Marines. Before the widespread adoption of the procedure, there was often tension between the two groups, with Firstborn sometimes viewing Primaris as untested newcomers, and Primaris sometimes seeing Firstborn as relics of a previous era. The Rubicon has helped bridge this divide by demonstrating that the distinction between Firstborn and Primaris is not absolute, that warriors from one category can join the other. Veteran Firstborn who successfully cross the Rubicon often become respected figures who can speak to both experiences, helping to integrate the two groups into cohesive fighting forces. The Rubicon Primaris represents one of the most significant developments in Space Marine creation since the Emperor first designed the gene seed organs 10,000 years ago. It offers a path for veteran warriors to enhance themselves without requiring them to be recruited and trained from scratch, preserving their accumulated experience and knowledge while granting them superior physical capabilities. As the procedure becomes more refined and success rates continue to improve, it seems likely that the Rubicon will become increasingly common, eventually perhaps becoming a standard part of a Space Marine service history, rather than an exceptional undertaking attempted only by the most dedicated or desperate warriors. Final trials and initiation into the chapter. After years of transformation, training, and conditioning, the time comes when a neophyte must prove that they are ready to be accepted as a full battle brother of their chapter. The implantation process is complete, with all 19 standard gene seed organs, plus the 3 additional Primaris organs, successfully integrated and functioning. The physical training has transformed them into warriors of superhuman capability. The psychological conditioning has reshaped their minds into instruments of focused purpose. But before they can truly call themselves Space Marines, they must pass final trials that test whether all of these elements have successfully combined to create a warrior worthy of the chapter's legacy. The nature of these final trials varies enormously between chapters, reflecting their individual cultures and traditions. What remains consistent is that the trials are designed to be genuinely dangerous, with real possibility of death or failure, even for candidates who have successfully completed the transformation process. A chapter cannot afford to induct warriors who are not fully capable and committed, and the final trials serve to weed out any who have made it this far, but who still lack something essential. For many chapters, the final trial involves deployment as a scout marine, serving in the chapter's 10th company or its equivalent. This assignment places neophytes in combat situations where they must demonstrate their abilities in actual warfare, rather than training exercises. Scout Marines typically operate in reconnaissance and infiltration roles, tasks that require different skills than the direct assault tactics favored by fully equipped battle brothers. The neophytes must prove they can gather intelligence, move stealthily through hostile territory, survive independently for extended periods, and complete their missions, even when facing overwhelming opposition. The Scout Marine phase serves multiple purposes beyond simply testing the neophytes' combat capabilities. It exposes them to real warfare in a role where their enhanced physiology provides significant advantages over mortal scouts, but where they are not expected to engage in the kind of head-on combat that fully armored Space Marines typically conduct. This allows them to develop combat experience and judgment, while minimizing the risk that inexperience will lead to catastrophic mistakes. It also teaches them to work as part of a team, as scout squads must coordinate their actions to accomplish their missions successfully. During their time as scouts, the neophytes are typically under the direct supervision of veteran Space Marines who observe their performance and provide guidance. These mentors watch not just for combat effectiveness, but for signs of the character traits that the chapter values. Do the neophytes show courage in the face of danger? Do they maintain discipline when surprised or under pressure? Do they demonstrate the kind of tactical thinking that will be necessary in more complex operations? Do they work effectively with their squad mates, or do they prioritize personal glory over team success? The duration of scout service varies by chapter and by individual, with some neophytes progressing to full battle brother status within a few months, while others remain in the scout company for years. The variation reflects both differences in how quickly individuals master the necessary skills and differences in how chapters evaluate readiness. Some chapters maintain rigid standards that all neophytes must meet before advancement, while others make case-by-case judgments based on demonstrated capability and need. Not all chapters follow the Scout Marine model for final trials. The Black Templars, for example, assign their neophytes to serve as squires to veteran initiates, learning through direct participation in frontline combat rather than through reconnaissance roles. Neophytes accompany their initiate mentors into battle, fighting alongside them and learning by observation and experience. This approach reflects the Black Templars' crusading nature and their belief that warriors learn best through direct exposure to the fury of combat, rather than through the more measured approach favored by Codex-compliant chapters. The Space Wolves employ yet another approach, with their neophytes first serving as Bloodclaws, assault troops who fight with controlled fury under the guidance of veteran Wolfguard. The Bloodclaws are given the most dangerous and demanding assault missions, places where their youthful aggression and enthusiasm can be directed productively. As they gain experience and learn to temper their savagery with wisdom, Bloodclaws eventually advance to become Grey Hunters, full battle brothers whose skills have been proven through survival in the most brutal combat situations the chapter faces. Regardless of the specific form the final trials take, they inevitably result in casualties. Some neophytes die in combat, their enhanced physiology proving insufficient to protect them from the overwhelming violence of war. Others sustain injuries so severe that even their enhanced healing capabilities cannot fully repair the damage, leaving them crippled or forced into non-combat roles within the chapter. A few fail to meet the standards set by their evaluators, demonstrating competence, but not the excellence that the chapter demands from its full battle brothers. Those neophytes who successfully complete the final trials undergo a formal initiation ceremony that marks their acceptance as full battle brothers of the chapter. The specifics of this ceremony vary as much as the trials themselves do, but certain elements are common across many chapters. The neophyte typically swears oaths of loyalty and service, formally committing themselves to the Emperor, the Imperium, and their chapter. They receive their full suit of power armor, typically in a ritual that emphasizes the sacred nature of the equipment and the responsibility that comes with wearing it. They are assigned to a specific company and squad, becoming part of the tactical organization through which the chapter wages war. For many chapters, the initiation ceremony is also when the new battle brother receives their final implant, or marking, that distinguishes them as a full space marine. This might be the activation of certain gene seed organs that were previously kept dormant, additional conditioning or indoctrination, or physical markings such as tattoos or brands that identify them as belonging to the chapter. These final touches serve both practical and symbolic purposes, marking the transition from neophyte to battle brother in ways that are visible to all. The psychological impact of completing the transformation and being accepted as a full battle brother is profound. The new Space Marine has spent years working toward this goal, enduring pain, loss, and transformation that would break most humans. Now they have succeeded, proving themselves worthy to stand alongside veterans who have served for decades or even centuries. This achievement provides a sense of accomplishment and purpose that helps define their identity going forward. They are no longer aspirants hoping to become Space Marines. They are Space Marines, warriors of the Imperium whose lives are dedicated to the Emperor's service. However, acceptance as a full battle brother also marks the beginning of new responsibilities and challenges. The new Space Marine is no longer a neophyte whose mistakes might be forgiven as part of the learning process. They are expected to perform at the level of a full warrior, to contribute meaningfully to their squad's effectiveness, and to uphold the chapter's reputation through their actions. The scrutiny they face during their transformation does not end with their initiation. Rather, it continues throughout their service, with their battle brothers and superiors constantly evaluating whether they live up to the standards expected of a Space Marine. For Primaris Marines created through the standard recruitment and training process, their initiation marks the successful completion of a journey that typically takes 8 to 10 years from initial recruitment. They have grown from human children into towering warriors standing over 8 feet tall, possessed of strength that allows them to crush skulls with their bare hands and resilience that allows them to fight on despite wounds that would kill lesser beings multiple times over. Their minds have been shaped and honed into perfect instruments of war, capable of processing tactical information at speeds that seem superhuman and maintaining focus in situations that would overwhelm normal human psychology. The initiation of Primaris Marines often includes acknowledgement of the specific enhancements that distinguish them from traditional Space Marines. They may be reminded of the 3 additional organs they carry, of the 10,000 years of research and development that went into creating the Primaris project, and of the expectations that they will prove worthy of the resources invested in their creation. This additional layer of identity, marking them as not just Space Marines but specifically Primaris Space Marines, shapes how they view themselves and how others view them within the chapter. For Space Marines who have crossed the Rubicon Primaris, there is often a secondary initiation ceremony acknowledging their transformation. These warriors do not need to prove themselves through scout service or similar trials. Their decades or centuries of prior service speak to their capability and dedication. Instead, the ceremony focuses on recognizing their courage in choosing to undergo the Rubicon and celebrating their successful transformation. They are welcomed into the ranks of Primaris Marines as veterans, whose experience is valued, not as neophytes who must prove themselves from scratch. The moment of initiation represents a culmination, but not an ending. The new Battle Brothers training and development will continue throughout their service as they gain combat experience, learn new skills, and potentially advance to positions of greater responsibility within the chapter. They will fight in countless battles, face enemies beyond number, and witness horrors that would drive unenhanced humans mad. They will see Battle Brothers die beside them, will suffer wounds that push their enhanced physiology to its limits, and will be tested in ways that will determine whether they merely survive or whether they excel. But they will face all of this as Space Marines. As warriors who have proven themselves worthy to bear that title. They have crossed the threshold from human to posthuman, from aspirant to battle brother, from potential to reality. They have paid the price in pain, suffering, and the loss of almost everything that made them human. In return, they have gained capabilities that allow them to stand against the darkness threatening humanity and a purpose that gives meaning to their existence. They are the Emperor's angels of death, and they know no fear. Life as a Primaris Marine, the weight of perfection. The life of a Primaris Space Marine after initiation into full Battle Brother status is one of constant warfare, rigorous discipline, and absolute dedication to the chapter and the Imperium. These warriors exist for one purpose: to defend humanity against the countless threats that assail it from all sides. Every aspect of their existence is structured around this singular mission, from the way they organize their time, to the relationships they form with their battle brothers, to how they process the experiences of constant combat. A Primaris Marine's daily routine, when not actively engaged in combat operations, follows patterns that have been refined over thousands of years of Space Marine tradition. They rise early, typically after only a few hours of sleep made possible by their modified sleep patterns. The catalepsian node allows them to function on far less rest than normal humans require, and Space Marines typically sleep in shifts that would leave unenhanced warriors exhausted and ineffective. This ability to operate with minimal rest is crucial for maintaining constant readiness, as threats to the Imperium rarely arrive at convenient times. Physical training occupies a significant portion of a Space Marine's routine. Even with their enhanced physiology, constant exercise is necessary to maintain peak condition and to keep their implanted organs functioning optimally. Training sessions are intense, involving weights that would crush normal humans, combat drills that would be lethal if performed without superhuman reflexes, and endurance exercises that push even enhanced bodies to their limits. The training serves multiple purposes. It maintains physical conditioning, it reinforces combat skills and tactics, and it provides opportunities for battle brothers to bond with their squad mates through shared struggle. Weapons maintenance and equipment care are treated with almost religious reverence. A Space Marine's weapons and armor are not simply tools, but sacred artifacts that must be maintained in perfect condition. Battle brothers spend hours cleaning and maintaining their bolters, checking every component for signs of wear or damage, reciting prayers to the machine spirits believed to inhabit the weapons while they work. Power armor receives similar attention, with Space Marines personally maintaining their suits and only calling upon the chapter's tech marines for repairs that require specialized knowledge or equipment. Prayer and religious observance form another major component of daily life. Most chapters maintain deep religious traditions centered around the worship of the Emperor and veneration of their Primarch. Space Marines participate in regular prayer services, recite litanies before and after combat, and engage in meditation designed to reinforce their dedication and focus. The chapter's chaplains lead these observances, ensuring that the spiritual dimension of service as a Space Marine receives appropriate attention alongside the physical and tactical aspects. Combat operations, when they occur, dominate everything else. When the chapter is committed to battle, normal routines are set aside as the Space Marines focus entirely on the mission at hand. Primaris Marines excel in a variety of combat roles, from the direct assault tactics favored by intercessor squads to the infiltration and sabotage missions that Vanguard units specialize in, to the heavy fire support provided by Hellblasters and similar units. The specific role a Primaris Marine fills depends on their aptitudes, their training, and their chapter's needs, but all Primaris Marines share the enhanced capabilities that make them formidable warriors regardless of specialization. The experience of combat is fundamentally different for Space Marines than for normal humans. Their enhanced reflexes allow them to process battlefield information and react to threats with speeds that seem superhuman. Their psychological conditioning suppresses the fear and panic that affects unenhanced warriors, allowing them to maintain tactical focus even in situations of extreme chaos and violence. Their enhanced physiology means they can sustain injuries that would incapacitate normal soldiers while continuing to fight effectively, and their Laraman cells seal wounds almost instantly to prevent excessive blood loss. For Primaris Marines specifically, combat also involves capabilities that traditional Space Marines do not possess. The sinew coils allow them to deliver blows with force that exceeds even what their enhanced musculature alone would provide, enabling feats of strength that impress even veteran firstborn Astartes. The Belisarian furnace provides a failsafe that can keep them fighting through injuries that would force traditional Space Marines to withdraw, though the activation of the furnace is both physically draining and mentally disorienting. The enhanced size and strength provided by the Magnificat's effects make them physically dominant in close combat situations, able to overpower opponents that might challenge traditional Space Marines. Between combat operations, Primaris Marines engage in extensive tactical study and mission planning. They review recordings of previous battles, analyzing what went right and what went wrong to extract lessons that will improve future performance. They study intelligence reports on enemy forces they might face, learning the strengths and weaknesses of different Xeno species and Chaos forces. They participate in tactical simulations and war games designed to maintain sharp tactical thinking and to develop coordination within their squads and companies. The bonds between battle brothers represent some of the most important relationships in a Space Marine's life. These warriors fight together, train together, and live together in a way that creates connections far deeper than normal friendship. They trust their squad mates with their lives in every combat operation, knowing that their survival often depends on their brother's actions. This trust is reinforced through shared experiences of combat and training, through the constant proximity that comes from living in the close quarters of a fortress monastery or strike cruiser, and through the psychological conditioning that emphasizes the importance of the chapter collective over individual concerns. However, these relationships are also shaped by the psychological transformation that created the Space Marines in the first place. The emotional suppression and psychological conditioning mean that Space Marine relationships lack certain dimensions that characterize normal human bonds. A Space Marine might trust a battle brother absolutely and be willing to die for him, but they might also watch that same brother fall in combat without experiencing the kind of grief that would devastate an unenhanced human. The relationships are real and meaningful, but they are fundamentally different from civilian relationships in ways that reflect the posthuman nature of what Space Marines have become. Primaris Marines face additional complications in their relationships with traditional Space Marines within mixed chapters. When Primaris Marines were first introduced, many firstborn viewed them with suspicion or resentment, seeing them as potential replacements rather than reinforcements. These tensions have eased somewhat as Primaris Marines have proven themselves in combat, and as the Rubicon Primaris has allowed firstborn to become Primaris themselves, but some degree of distinction often remains. Primaris Marines sometimes form their own subgroups within chapters, bonds based on shared experience of the enhanced transformation process that firstborn cannot fully understand. The chain of command within a chapter provides structure and purpose to a Space Marine's existence, They know precisely where they fit within their chapter's organization, who they report to, and who reports to them. This clear hierarchy eliminates ambiguity about roles and responsibilities, allowing Space Marines to focus on executing their assigned tasks without wasting mental energy on political maneuvering or status concerns. Advancement through the ranks is based on proven capability and demonstrated leadership, with battle brothers who excel at tactics and inspire their fellows being identified for promotion to sergeant, then to officer ranks, and potentially eventually to positions of chapter leadership. For some Primaris Marines, service takes specialized forms beyond standard combat roles. Librarians, the chapter's psychers, receive additional training to control and weaponize their psychic abilities in service to the chapter. Tech Marines are sent to Mars to study with the Adeptus Mechanicus, learning to maintain and repair the sophisticated equipment the chapter relies upon. Apothecaries train in the biological sciences necessary to oversee the creation of new Space Marines and to recover gene seed from fallen brothers. Chaplains study the spiritual dimension of service, learning to minister to their battle brothers' souls and maintain the chapter's religious traditions. Each of these specialized roles requires years of additional training beyond the standard transformation process, but offers opportunities to serve the chapter in ways that can be as important as direct combat effectiveness. The weight of being a Primaris Marine manifests in various ways throughout their service. They are constantly aware that they represent the pinnacle of what Space Marines can be, the culmination of 10,000 years of refinement and improvement of the Emperor's original design. This awareness can be motivating, driving them to excel in their duties and prove themselves worthy of the resources invested in their creation. But it can also be burdensome, creating pressure to maintain perfection that can be psychologically taxing, even for beings engineered for mental resilience. Primaris Marines also bear the weight of expectations from both their battle brothers and the larger Imperium. Traditional Space Marines sometimes expect Primaris to outperform them in all situations, judging them more harshly for mistakes or failures than they would judge Firstborn in similar circumstances. Imperial commanders who have heard of the Primaris Marines' enhanced capabilities sometimes deploy them to the most dangerous missions, assuming that their physical advantages will ensure success regardless of the tactical situation. These expectations create pressure that even enhanced warriors can feel, though they are conditioned to channel such feelings into determination rather than anxiety. The psychological isolation that comes with being a Space Marine is particularly acute for Primaris Marines. They are separated from normal humanity not just by their physical enhancement and military training, but by the very nature of what they have become. They cannot relate to unenhanced humans in normal ways, lacking the emotional range and personal concerns that characterize civilian life. Interactions with mortals are formal and functional, focused on military necessity rather than social connection. The psychological conditioning that makes them effective warriors also makes them alien to the very humans they are sworn to protect. This isolation means that a Primaris Marine's entire social world exists within their chapter. Their relationships with battle brothers provide the only emotional connections they maintain, the only context where they can be understood by others who share their experiences and nature. When a Space Marine speaks of their chapter as their family, this is not mere metaphor but literal truth. The chapter is all they have, the only place where they belong, and the only community that can accommodate what they have become. The life of a Primaris Marine is one of purpose and meaning found through service, but it is also a life of sacrifice and limitation. They have traded almost everything that makes humans human in exchange for the capability to defend humanity against threats that would overwhelm normal soldiers. They exist in a state between mortal and something more, powerful beyond normal human comprehension, but constrained by that same power to lives of endless warfare and discipline. They are the Emperor's greatest weapons, and like all weapons, they exist to be used rather than to live for themselves. The cost. What is lost in the transformation? For all the enhanced capabilities that come with becoming a Primaris Marine, for all the strength and resilience and superhuman abilities that the transformation grants, there is a price to be paid. This price is rarely discussed openly, mentioned only in whispers between those who have undergone the transformation, or acknowledged in the private thoughts of those rare Space Marines who retain sufficient capacity for introspection to contemplate what they have lost. Understanding what it truly costs to become a Primaris Marine requires looking beyond the physical pain and danger of the transformation process to examine what is sacrificed in more subtle and permanent ways. The most obvious loss is the aspirant's previous identity and life. When a child is recruited to become a Space Marine, they are separated from their family, their community, and everything familiar. They will never return to the life they knew before, never see their parents or siblings again, never walk the streets of their home settlement as anything but a visiting warrior, fundamentally alien to the people they once belonged among. This separation is absolute and permanent, a severance of all connections to their previous existence that begins the moment they are selected for recruitment. For some aspirants, particularly those from cultures that revere Space Marines as divine figures, this separation might not feel like a loss. They have been chosen for a glorious purpose, elevated beyond the limitations of normal humanity. But even in these cases, there is a farewell being said to a life that will never be returned to. An acknowledgement that the person they were is ending so that something new can emerge. For aspirants from cultures where Space Marine recruitment is more ambiguous or even resented, the separation can be traumatic, a forced conscription into a future they never chose. As the transformation progresses, the psychological conditioning begins to erode the aspirant's memories of their previous life. This is partly a natural consequence of the time that passes and the new experiences that dominate their existence, but it is also a deliberate effect of the conditioning process. The neophyte's attention is constantly directed toward their new identity as a Space Marine, toward the chapter's history and values, toward the duties they will be expected to fulfill. Their previous life becomes increasingly irrelevant and distant, fading like a half-remembered dream. By the time the transformation is complete, many Primaris Marines struggle to recall specific details about their lives before recruitment, remembering only vague impressions of people and places that no longer feel like they were ever truly real. Some chapters, most notably the Grey Knights, deliberately erase all memories of the aspirant's previous life as part of the transformation process. They reason that emotional connections to the past could create vulnerabilities that enemies of the Imperium might exploit, and that warriors without such connections can focus more completely on their duties. Most chapters do not take such extreme measures, but the gradual erosion of pre-transformation memories serves a similar purpose, ensuring that the Space Marine's loyalty and identity are centered entirely on the chapter, rather than divided between their current existence and memories of what they once were. The transformation also costs the neophyte much of their emotional range and capacity for normal human feelings. The psychological conditioning designed to make them effective warriors necessarily suppresses or eliminates responses that might interfere with combat effectiveness. Fear, particularly fear of death, is systematically reduced to manageable levels through both conditioning and the physiological changes that alter how their brain processes threat information. But this suppression extends beyond fear to affect other emotions as well. The capacity for grief is diminished, allowing Space Marines to watch battle brothers die without being paralyzed by loss. The capacity for certain types of joy is reduced, as the simple pleasures that bring meaning to civilian life lose relevance for beings whose entire existence is structured around duty and warfare. This emotional flattening means that Primaris Marines experience life differently from normal humans. They can feel loyalty, pride in accomplishment, satisfaction in duty fulfilled, and the camaraderie that comes from shared struggle with their battle brothers. But they lack the full spectrum of emotional experience that characterizes human existence. They do not fall in love, do not form families, do not pursue personal ambitions unrelated to their service to the chapter. They exist in a narrowed emotional landscape where everything is filtered through the lens of duty and purpose, unable to access feelings and experiences that are fundamental to what it means to be human. This loss of emotional range also affects how Space Marines relate to unenhanced humans. They struggle to understand motivations and behaviors driven by feelings they no longer experience. A civilian's fear of death seems irrational to beings who have been conditioned to face death without hesitation. Emotional attachments to family members seem like distractions that interfere with optimal functioning. Personal ambitions, unrelated to military service, seem selfish when survival of the Imperium demands total dedication. This inability to fully empathize with normal human concerns creates a barrier between Space Marines and the people they protect, a gulf of understanding that can never be fully bridged. The biological transformation carries its own costs beyond the pain of the implantation procedures themselves. The aspirant's body is permanently altered in ways that mark them as fundamentally different from unenhanced humans. They grow to heights that make normal-sized furniture and architecture uncomfortable or unusable. Their altered metabolism requires specialized dietary supplements and periodic chemical treatments to maintain stability. Many of their gene seed organs require ongoing maintenance and monitoring, creating dependencies on chapter apothecaries and equipment that make truly independent existence impossible. More subtly, the enhanced physiology changes how Primaris Marines experience the physical world. Their augmented senses process information differently from normal human perception, providing more data but filtering it through systems that prioritize tactical relevance over aesthetic appreciation. They see more clearly, hear more precisely, smell more acutely, but these enhanced perceptions are channeled toward combat effectiveness, rather than toward experiencing the world for its own sake. A sunset might be beautiful to a normal human, but to a Space Marine, it is primarily a change in light conditions that affects sightlines and thermal signatures. This transformation of perception is necessary for creating effective warriors, but it represents a loss of connection to the world that most humans take for granted. The social costs of becoming a Space Marine are equally significant. Beyond the separation from their original families and communities, Primaris Marines give up any possibility of normal social relationships. They cannot marry or have children. Their genetic modifications make reproduction impossible, and their psychological conditioning eliminates any desire for such connections anyway. They cannot maintain friendships with civilians in any meaningful sense, as the gulf between Space Marine and normal human makes genuine social connection impossible. Even their relationships with other Space Marines are shaped and constrained by the military hierarchy and the psychological conditioning that emphasizes duty over personal attachment. This social isolation means that Space Marines exist in a very narrow social world limited to their chapter. They have battle brothers, they have superiors and subordinates, but they do not have friends or family in the civilian sense of those terms. When a Space Marine speaks of brotherhood, they are describing something fundamentally different from civilian friendship, a bond forged through shared combat and collective purpose, rather than through personal affection or chosen companionship. These bonds are real and important, but they are not replacements for the full range of social connections that characterize normal human existence. The loss of autonomy and personal agency represents another significant cost. From the moment an aspirant begins the transformation process, their life belongs to the chapter rather than to themselves. They do not choose their assignments, their role within the chapter, or how they spend their time. They follow orders without question, subordinating personal preferences to the decisions of their superiors. The psychological conditioning ensures that they accept this loss of autonomy without resentment, but it remains a cost nonetheless. They are weapons to be deployed according to strategic and tactical necessity rather than individuals with the freedom to determine their own paths. This loss of agency extends to decisions about their own bodies and health. When a Space Marine is injured, the decision about what treatment they receive and whether they continue serving in combat roles is made by chapter apothecaries and command staff, rather than by the individual warrior. When a firstborn Space Marine is offered the opportunity to cross the Rubicon Primaris, the decision about whether to accept is often influenced or even mandated by their chapter's needs and policies, rather than being purely a personal choice. Space Marines are valuable resources that the chapter manages strategically, not individuals with full control over their own existence. For Primaris Marines specifically, there is an additional psychological burden that comes from being living proof of concept for the Primaris project. They know that they were created using techniques and knowledge that took 10,000 years to develop, that vast resources were invested in making them superior to traditional Space Marines. This knowledge creates pressure to justify that investment through exceptional performance, to prove that the Primaris project was worthwhile and that they are indeed superior to their firstborn brothers. This pressure exists even when traditional Space Marines do not deliberately apply it, as many Primaris Marines internalize it through their awareness of their own origins and purpose. There is also a loss of continuity with the chapter's history and traditions that affects Primaris Marines created through the standard recruitment process rather than through the Rubicon. They lack the personal experience of serving alongside the chapter's legendary heroes, of participating in the historic campaigns that shaped the chapter's identity. They learn about these events through study and indoctrination rather than through lived experience, which creates a subtle separation from firstborn who carry those memories. For entirely Primaris chapters created during the Ultima founding, this disconnect is even more pronounced, as these chapters lack the centuries or millennia of tradition and accumulated experience that older chapters possess. Perhaps most fundamentally, the transformation costs the aspirant their humanity itself. By the time the process is complete, the being that emerges is posthuman, simultaneously more and less than the human child who began the journey. They have gained capabilities that make them superior warriors, but they have lost much of what made them human in the first place. Their thoughts, feelings, and perceptions have been reshaped into patterns that optimize combat effectiveness at the cost of the full human experience. They exist in a state between mortal and something transcendent, powerful but constrained, capable but incomplete. This posthuman existence is not necessarily a tragic loss from the Space Marine's perspective. The psychological conditioning ensures that most Space Marines do not mourn what they have lost, as they have been conditioned to value their current existence and purpose above any alternative. They find meaning and satisfaction in their service, in the bonds they form with their battle brothers, in the knowledge that they defend humanity against threats that would otherwise destroy it. They are, by their own understanding, fulfilled in their role as the Emperor's weapons. But from an external perspective, from the viewpoint of those who still possess the full range of human experience and capability, there is something profoundly sad about what Space Marines have sacrificed. Children are taken and transformed into living weapons, stripped of their humanity and rebuilt into instruments of warfare. They gain power and purpose, but lose almost everything else. They defend humanity, but can never truly be part of it, serving as guardians who stand forever outside the communities they protect. They are necessary for the Imperium's survival, but their necessity does not make their sacrifice any less complete, or their loss any less real. Conclusion. The journey from human child to Primaris Marine is one of the most extreme transformations that can be deliberately inflicted upon a human being within the Imperium. It strips away almost everything that makes a person human and rebuilds them into something designed for one singular purpose: to be an effective warrior in humanity's desperate struggle for survival. The process is brutal, dangerous, and irreversible, costing aspirants their previous lives, their emotional range, their autonomy, and ultimately, their humanity itself. Those who survive emerge as post-human beings possessed of capabilities that would seem impossible to those who have not witnessed them. Warriors who can stand against the galaxy's most terrible threats and prevail through a combination of superior physiology, extensive training, and absolute dedication to duty. The creation of Primaris Marines represents the culmination of 10,000 years of genetic research and refinement, the result of Archmagos Belisarius Coll's obsessive dedication to improving upon the Emperor's original design for the Space Marines. The three additional organs that distinguish Primaris from traditional Space Marines, the sinew coils, the Magnificat, and the Belisarian furnace, push the boundaries of what enhanced human biology can achieve while still maintaining compatibility with the basic Space Marine creation process. These organs make Primaris Marines larger, stronger, more resilient, and more capable than their already superhuman firstborn brothers, creating warriors who represent the absolute peak of what genetically enhanced humanity can accomplish. But superior physical capabilities alone do not make a Space Marine. The psychological conditioning and hypno-indoctrination that accompanies the physical transformation is equally crucial, reshaping the aspirant's mind into an instrument of focused purpose and unwavering loyalty. The combination of physical enhancement and mental conditioning creates warriors who think differently from normal humans, who process combat information with superhuman speed and clarity, who can maintain tactical focus in situations that would overwhelm unenhanced soldiers, and who face death without fear because they have been conditioned to value their duty above their own survival. The path to becoming a Primaris Marine begins with recruitment, continues through years of brutal training and surgical transformation, and culminates in initiation as a full battle brother. Every step of this journey carries risk, with many aspirants dying or failing before the process is complete. Those who survive have proven themselves worthy through their physical resilience, genetic compatibility, mental strength, and absolute dedication to becoming what their chapter needs them to be. They have paid the price in pain, suffering, and sacrifice, and they emerge as warriors ready to serve the Emperor and defend humanity against the countless threats that assail it from all sides. For existing Space Marines, the Rubicon Primaris offers a second path to joining the ranks of the enhanced Primaris Marines. This procedure is even more dangerous than the standard transformation process, requiring the Space Marine to effectively die and be reborn through the activation of the newly implanted Belisarian furnace. The early failure rates were catastrophically high, but as the procedure has been refined and more apothecaries have gained experience with it, crossing the Rubicon has become increasingly survivable. It remains an ordeal that tests even veteran Space Marines to their limits, but it offers those who succeed the opportunity to continue serving their chapters with enhanced capabilities that will allow them to fight effectively for additional decades or centuries. Life as a Primaris Marine is one of constant warfare, rigorous discipline, and absolute dedication to the chapter and the Imperium. These warriors exist in a narrow world defined entirely by military service, their days filled with training, prayer, equipment maintenance, and combat operations. They form bonds with their battle brothers that are deeper than normal friendship, but narrower than civilian relationships. Connections forged through shared combat and collective purpose rather than through personal affection. They are effective and fulfilled in their role as defenders of humanity, but they are also fundamentally alien to the very humans they protect, separated from normal human experience by the transformation that created them. The cost of becoming a Primaris Marine is immense and permanent. Aspirants lose their previous lives, their emotional range, their autonomy, and ultimately their humanity itself. They gain capabilities that make them superior warriors, but they sacrifice almost everything else in the process. This sacrifice is necessary for the Imperium's survival. Without Space Marines to defend it, humanity would have been overwhelmed and destroyed long ago by the countless Xenos species and Chaos forces that threaten it from all sides. But the necessity of this sacrifice does not make it any less complete or the loss any less real. Understanding what it takes to become a Primaris Marine means confronting the terrible pragmatism at the heart of the Imperium's approach to survival. Children are deliberately transformed into weapons because humanity needs weapons of such power to have any chance of enduring in a galaxy filled with threats. The process is brutal because creating warriors capable of standing against such threats requires brutal methods. The sacrifice is absolute because anything less than absolute dedication would be insufficient for the task at hand. The Primaris Marines are triumphs of genetic engineering and military conditioning, but they are also monuments to the price humanity must pay to survive in the grim darkness of the far future. In the end, the Primaris Marines stand as both hope and warning. They are hope because they demonstrate that humanity retains the capability to create defenders powerful enough to face the galaxy's most terrible threats and prevail. They are warning because they show the lengths to which humanity must go to survive, the sacrifices that must be made, and the costs that must be paid. They are the Emperor's angels of death, post-human warriors who have traded their humanity for the power to defend humanity itself. They know no fear, for they have been conditioned to suppress it. They know no doubt, for they have been trained to absolute certainty in their purpose. They know no mercy, for mercy is a luxury that humanity can no longer afford. This is what it takes to become a Primaris Marine in Warhammer 40k, everything. If you found this deep dive into the making of a Primaris Marine fascinating, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more in-depth explorations of Warhammer 40k lore. The universe of the 41st Millennium is vast and filled with stories worth telling, from the smallest details of how technology works to the grandest narratives of wars that span entire sectors of space. Your support helps make these videos possible and allows me to continue bringing you the kind of detailed, thoughtful content that treats this universe with the seriousness and attention it deserves. Until next time, may the Emperor protect.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.